The wagon wheels groaned to a halt in front of the weathered ranch house, just as the August sun began its descent toward the New Mexico horizon. And Roswell Harper looked up from mending a fence post to see a woman with hollow eyes and four rail-thin children staring at him with expressions that spoke of desperation and hunger so profound it made his chest tighten. He set down his tools and walked toward them, his boots kicking up dust with each step. The woman sat rigid on the wagon seat, her black dress faded to gray in places, her hands gripping the reins so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The children ranged in age from what looked like maybe 12 down to a little one who could not have been more than 4, all of them silent in a way that unnerved him. Children should make noise, he thought. They should run and play and cause mischief. These 4 sat perfectly still, watching him with eyes too old for their faces. "Madam," he said, removing his hat. "Can I help you?" The woman's throat worked as she swallowed. "I apologize for the intrusion, sir. We have been traveling for 3 days and I saw your homestead from the road. I was wondering if you might spare some water for the children and perhaps point us toward Los Alamos. I was told there might be work there." Her voice carried the refined edges of education, though exhaustion had worn it thin. Roswell glanced at the children again, noting the way the oldest girl had her arm around the youngest, protective and maternal despite her own obvious fatigue. "Los Alamos is another 15 miles northeast," he said. "You would not make it before full dark, and the road gets treacherous once the sun goes down." The woman's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "I see. Well, if we could just trouble you for some water, we will press on as far as we can manage." Roswell looked at the sky, then back at the wagon. The horse in the traces looked as worn out as its passengers, ribs showing through its dull coat. This family would not make it another mile, let alone 15. "When did you last eat?" he asked. The woman's chin lifted slightly. "We have provisions." "That was not what I asked." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the oldest boy spoke up, his voice cracking with adolescence. "Yesterday morning, sir, we had the last of the bread." "Thomas," the woman said sharply, but there was no strength behind it. Roswell put his hat back on and made his decision. "I was just about to make supper. I have more than enough for guests. You and your children are welcome to stay the night in the barn. It is clean and there is fresh hay. In the morning, I can give you directions to Los Alamos, maybe even ride with you to make sure you get there safely." "Sir, I could not possibly impose. It is not an imposition, madam. It is supper. And honestly, I could use the company." He saw her wavering, pride battling with the stark reality of 4 hungry children. The youngest one, a little boy with dark curls, leaned against his sister and whispered something Roswell could not hear. "He says his stomach hurts." The girl translated quietly. That settled it. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She blinked back quickly. "You are very kind, sir. We accept." "Thank you. Roswell Harper," he said, offering his hand to help her down from the wagon. "And you are Grace Winston," she said, her hand small and cold in his despite the summer heat. "This is Thomas, Mary, Samuel, and little Joseph." Roswell nodded to each child in turn, then moved to unhitch their horse. "Let us get your animal some feed and water, then I will show you where you can wash up while I get supper started." He led the horse to his small stable, aware of the family following behind him like uncertain shadows. His ranch was not much, just a modest house he had built himself. A barn, a stable, and enough land to run a small herd of cattle. He had been working it alone for 3 years now since settling in New Mexico territory, and the solitude had suited him just fine. But looking at these weary travelers, he felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with a loneliness he had not acknowledged until this very moment. After settling the horse with feed and water, he showed Grace and the children to the pump behind the house where they could wash the dust from their faces and hands. Then he went inside to take stock of what he had to cook. His larder was simple but adequate. He pulled out bacon, beans, cornmeal for baking powder biscuits, and started coffee brewing. As he worked, he could hear the children's voices outside, still subdued but with an edge of something that might have been hope. He counted in his head. 5 extra plates. He had enough dishes, just barely, having kept his mother's old set when he moved west. Grace appeared at the door, her face clean now, revealing delicate features marked by grief and hardship. "Mr. Harper, please let me help. It is the least I can do." "I have it well in hand, Mrs. Winston, but I would not turn down the company." She stepped inside, looking around the neat interior of his home. He had always been tidy, a habit formed during his time in the cavalry before he mustered out and headed west. Everything had its place, and he kept it clean if sparse. "You have a lovely home," she said. "It serves its purpose." He handed her a bowl and the cornmeal. "Though if you are set on helping, you make better biscuits than I do, I would wager." The smallest hint of a smile touched her lips. "I suppose we will find out." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the sizzle of bacon in the pan and the scrape of her spoon against the bowl. Outside, he could hear Thomas talking to the younger children, his voice carrying through the open window. "How old are they?" Roswell asked, slicing more bacon. "Thomas is 12, Mary is 10, Samuel is 7, and Joseph just turned 4 last month." Her voice caught on the last part. "His father never got to see him turn 4. I am sorry for your loss." Grace's hand stilled in the biscuit dough. "Thank you." "It has been 6 months. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." She paused. "He was a good man, a schoolteacher in Kansas. We had a nice life there." "What brought you out west?" His brother. Her mouth tightened. "After James died, his brother claimed the house belonged to him, something about a deed from before we married. I do not know if it was legal or not, but I had no money to fight him, and he made it clear we were not welcome. So I sold what I could, bought that wagon and horse, and headed west. I heard New Mexico Territory had opportunities, that Los Alamos needed teachers." Roswell felt anger kindle in his gut at the thought of a man turning out his dead brother's wife and children, but he kept his voice even. "Can you teach?" "James taught me everything he knew. I have been helping him with his classes for years. I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and some Latin." Pride crept into her voice despite the circumstances. "Then Los Alamos will be lucky to have you." He arranged the bacon on a platter. "The town is growing. Ranchers bringing their families, businesses opening up. They have been wanting a proper school. Do you know this for certain, or are you just being kind?" "I ride into Los Alamos twice a month for supplies. I hear things. Last time I was there, the mayor was complaining about having no one to teach the children. His wife has been doing what she can, but she has her hands full with her own youngsters." Hope flickered across Grace's face, transforming it. For a moment, Roswell could see what she must have looked like before grief and hardship had carved themselves into her features. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in the painted, proper way of the women in town, but in a way that spoke of strength and character. "That is good to hear," she said softly. "I have been so worried. The money from selling our things is nearly gone. I have enough for maybe 2 weeks of room and board, and then—" She trailed off, shaping the biscuit dough with practiced hands. "Then you will be teaching, and you will be fine," Roswell said with more confidence than he felt. He did not actually know if the mayor would hire her, but he would make damn sure of it when he rode into town tomorrow. Grace slid the biscuits into the oven and Roswell called the children in to eat. They filed in quietly, eyes going wide at the sight of the table laden with food. It was simple fare, nothing fancy, but there was plenty of it. 5 extra plates, just as he had promised himself. Little Joseph climbed onto a chair and stared at the bacon as though he had never seen anything so wonderful. Samuel sat beside him, swallowing hard. Mary kept her hands folded in her lap, clearly fighting the urge to reach for the food before being given permission. Thomas, trying to act the man of the family, waited until everyone else was seated. "Let us say grace," Grace said, and they all bowed their heads. Her voice trembled slightly as she thanked the Lord for the food and for Mr. Harper's kindness, and Roswell felt something in his chest crack open just a little bit more. Then they ate. The children tried to maintain their manners, but hunger won out. They devoured everything he put in front of them, and he kept bringing more. Grace ate more slowly, but he noticed she finished everything on her plate, and when he offered seconds, she did not refuse. "This is the best supper I have ever had," Joseph announced, his face smeared with bacon grease. "That is because you were hungry, little man," Roswell said, but he felt pleased nonetheless. After supper, Mary and Thomas helped clear the table without being asked while Grace washed the dishes and Roswell dried. The domesticity of it struck him as both foreign and deeply right. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to be part of a family rhythm, the easy back and forth of shared tasks. "Tell me about your ranch," Grace said as she scrubbed a plate. "Not much to tell. I have about 200 acres, run maybe 60 head of cattle. It is not a huge operation, but it keeps me fed and pays the bills. I sell beef to the Army post and to the restaurants in Los Alamos. Do you manage it all yourself?" "For now. I have been thinking about hiring some help, but I have not gotten around to it yet." "That is a lot of work for one person." "I like to keep busy." She smiled at that. "I suppose idleness is not a virtue out here. Not if you want to survive." When the dishes were done, he showed them to the barn. He had been telling the truth about it being clean. The hayloft was spacious and dry, and he brought out blankets and an old quilt his mother had made. "This is far nicer than anywhere we have stayed the past few nights," Grace said, looking around. "Thank you again, Mr. Harper." "Roswell," he said. "If we are going to be neighbors, at least for a while, you might as well use my given name." "Then you must call me Grace," he nodded, suddenly awkward. "Well then, good night, Grace, children." "Good night, Mr. Roswell," they chorused, and he left them to their rest. Back in the house, he sat in his chair by the empty fireplace and tried to read, but his mind kept wandering to the family in his barn. He thought about Grace's proud carriage despite her circumstances, the way she handled her children with firm gentleness, the intelligence in her eyes. He thought about little Joseph's face when he saw the bacon, and Thomas trying so hard to be a man at 12 years old. Roswell Harper was 32 years old. He had spent 10 years in the cavalry, seen action against both Confederate forces and hostile tribes, and mustered out with enough money saved to buy this land and start fresh. He had never married, though he had thought about it from time to time. The life he had chosen was hard and solitary, not the kind of life most women would choose. But now, lying in his bed and listening to the night sounds of the ranch, he found himself thinking about what it might be like to have a family of his own. Not someday in the distant future, but now. Real and immediate, and already sleeping in his barn, he told himself he was being foolish. Grace Winston was a widow still in mourning, a woman with 4 children and troubles enough without him adding to them. But something had shifted when he set those 5 extra plates on his table, something he could not quite name, but that felt inevitable as sunrise. Morning came with roosters crowing and the smell of coffee. Roswell washed, dressed, and headed outside to find Grace already at the pump, helping the children wash up for the day. She had somehow managed to make herself and the children more presentable despite having slept in a barn. "Morning," he called. "Good morning, Roswell," she said, and he liked the sound of his name in her voice. "I have been thinking," he said. "Instead of just giving you directions to Los Alamos, why do not I hitch up my wagon and drive you there myself? I can introduce you to Mayor Patterson, make sure you get settled properly." Grace hesitated. "You have already done so much. I could not ask you to take a whole day away from your work." "You did not ask, I offered. Besides, I need to pick up some supplies anyway. 2 birds with 1 stone." "Are you always this kind to strangers?" "No," he admitted. "But you are not strangers anymore. You are people who ate at my table and slept under my roof. That makes you something more." She looked at him for a long moment, something searching in her gaze. Then she nodded. "We would be grateful for the ride. Thank you." It took about an hour to get both wagons ready. Roswell loaded their meager belongings from Grace's wagon into his sturdier one, which was better suited for the rough road. The children climbed in back, and Grace sat up front beside him. As they set off, the morning sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Los Alamos sat in a valley between hills dotted with piñon and juniper trees. It was not a large town, maybe 300 souls all told, but it was growing. The main street boasted a general store, a saloon, a church, a hotel, a blacksmith, and a scattering of other businesses. Ranch houses dotted the surrounding countryside. Roswell drove straight to the mayor's office, a small building attached to the general store. Mayor William Patterson was a robust man in his 50s with a handlebar mustache and a booming voice. "Harper," he called out when they entered. "Did not expect to see you for another couple weeks. What brings you to town?" "I brought someone you need to meet. Mayor Patterson, this is Mrs. Grace Winston." "Grace, Mayor Patterson." Grace is a trained teacher, recently arrived from Kansas with her 4 children. "I understand you have been looking for someone to run a proper school." The mayor's eyebrows shot up. "A teacher? Well now, that is fortuitous. My wife has been at her wit's end trying to educate the children in town. We have been advertising for months with no takers." He turned to Grace. "What are your qualifications, Mrs. Winston?" Grace straightened her shoulders. "My late husband was a schoolteacher in Kansas for 15 years. I assisted him with his classes and have experience teaching all primary subjects as well as some Latin and advanced mathematics. I have letters of reference, though they are in my trunk. Letters can wait. I am more interested in whether you can handle a classroom of 20-odd children ranging from age 5 to 15. "I can, sir. I have done so many times." The mayor rubbed his mustache thoughtfully. "The town can pay $30 a month, plus the use of the old schoolhouse. It has living quarters attached, nothing fancy but serviceable. You would start after Labor Day, give us time to get the word out and prepare the building." Grace's face went pale. "Did you say $30 a month and housing?" "That is right. Is that not acceptable?" "It is more than acceptable, sir. It is generous, I accept." "Well then." The mayor stuck out his hand and Grace shook it firmly. "Welcome to Los Alamos, Mrs. Winston. Let me show you the schoolhouse." They walked down the main street, the children trailing behind and gawking at the sights. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple wooden building with a bell tower and large windows. Inside, it was dusty but sound, with rows of desks and a large slate board at the front. The attached living quarters consisted of 2 small bedrooms, a main room with a stove, and a root cellar. "It needs cleaning and some repairs," the mayor admitted, "but it is solid." "It is perfect," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. She turned to Roswell. "Thank you. If you had not brought me here, if you had not vouched for me." "You did the rest yourself," he said. "You are qualified. The mayor would have hired you regardless." "Perhaps, but I might have been sleeping in my wagon another week before finding the courage to come to town." The mayor cleared his throat. "Well, I will leave you to look around. Come by my office before you leave town and we will settle the paperwork. And Harper, thank you for bringing her to us. You did the town a service." After the mayor left, Grace walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, looking out the windows. The children explored excitedly, claiming bedrooms and arguing good-naturedly about who would sleep where. "We have a home," Mary said wonderingly. "A real home." "We do, sweetheart," Grace said, and then she started to cry. Roswell felt awkward in the face of her tears. "Grace, what is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, and I was so scared it would not be." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "I am sorry. I do not mean to fall apart." "You are not falling apart, you are just relieved." "I am. These past 6 months I have felt like I was drowning, like no matter how hard I struggled, I kept sinking deeper. And then you appeared out of nowhere and threw me a rope. I just gave you supper and a ride to town." "You gave me hope," she corrected. "That is worth more than you know." They spent the rest of the day getting Grace and the children settled. Roswell went to the general store and bought cleaning supplies, some basic foodstuffs, and a few other necessities he insisted on putting on his own account despite Grace's protests. Then he helped her scrub down the schoolhouse while the children swept and carried water. By late afternoon, the place looked considerably better. They ate supper at the hotel restaurant, Roswell's treat, and then he walked them back to the schoolhouse as the sun set. "You have done too much already," Grace said at the door. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "No repayment necessary." He hesitated, then forged ahead. "But I would like to call on you if that would be all right. Make sure you are settling in properly." Something flickered in her eyes. "I would like that. I come to town twice a month. Maybe I could make it more often for a while." "That would be nice, Roswell." He tipped his hat and headed back to his wagon, feeling like a schoolboy with his first crush. The ride home in the darkness gave him plenty of time to think. He was attracted to Grace Winston, that much was clear, but it was more than just attraction. He admired her strength, her determination to provide for her children. He enjoyed her company, the quick intelligence behind her eyes, the way she did not simper or play coy. But she was a widow with 4 children, and he was a rancher living 15 miles from town. Even if she returned his interest, which was far from certain, the practicalities seemed daunting. What kind of life could he offer her? What right did he have to insert himself into her fresh start? These questions plagued him over the next week as he threw himself into ranch work. He repaired fences, checked his herd, broke a new horse to saddle. But no matter how busy he kept himself, his thoughts circled back to Grace and those 4 children. When Sunday came, he found himself riding to Los Alamos for church, something he rarely did. He told himself it was just to check in, to make sure they were managing all right. But when he walked into the small church and saw Grace sitting in a pew with her children, his heart lifted in a way that had nothing to do with spiritual devotion. She saw him and smiled, gesturing to the empty space beside her. He slid into the pew, acutely aware of her shoulder almost touching his. Little Joseph leaned around his mother and waved at him. Roswell waved back, earning a giggle. After the service, they stood outside in the sunshine talking. Grace looked better than she had a week ago, the shadows under her eyes less pronounced, her dress clean and pressed. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Very well. The people here have been kind. Several families have stopped by with welcome gifts. And I have been preparing the classroom for the start of school." "That is good to hear." "The children ask about you every day," she said, "wondering when Mr. Roswell will visit again." "Just the children," she blushed slightly. not just the children. His pulse quickened. I was thinking maybe I could take you all on a picnic this afternoon. There is a nice spot by the river just outside town, good for the children to run around. They would love that. So would I. They packed a basket from the hotel kitchen and drove out to the river in Roswell's wagon. The spot he chose had shade trees and a gentle bank where the children could wade safely. Grace spread a blanket while Roswell helped the boys skip stones and Mary picked wildflowers. "You are good with them," Grace observed as they ate cold chicken and fresh bread. "I like children. Just never had the chance to have any of my own. Never married, never found the right woman. I was in the cavalry for a long time, moving around, fighting. Not much opportunity for courting. By the time I mustered out, I was 30 and set in my ways. Figured I would probably stay a bachelor. And now," he looked at her directly, "now I am not so sure." Grace held his gaze. "I need to be honest with you, Roswell. These past weeks have been the worst of my life. I loved my husband deeply. Losing him nearly destroyed me. The only thing that kept me going was the children. They needed me so I could not fall apart. I understand. But here is the thing. James would not have wanted me to mourn forever. He would have wanted me to live, to be happy, to find love again if the opportunity arose." She paused. "I feel guilty even saying this because he has only been gone 6 months, but I feel something when I am with you, something I did not expect to feel again so soon." Roswell's throat went dry. "What do you feel? Interest? Attraction? The possibility of something more?" She laughed softly. "Is that terrible? Am I a terrible person for even thinking about this?" "No," he said firmly. "You are a woman doing her best in hard circumstances. There is nothing terrible about wanting happiness." "My children come first," she said. "Always. If we pursue this, whatever this is, you need to know that I am not just Grace. I am Grace and Thomas and Mary and Samuel and Joseph. We are a package. I would not want it any other way." She smiled then, full and genuine. "Then yes, Roswell Harper, you may call on me. You may court me if that is your intention." "It is very much my intention." They sat together on the blanket, watching the children play in the water, and Roswell felt more content than he had in years. This was what he had been missing without even knowing it, not just a woman, but a family. The noise and chaos and love that came with it. Over the next 2 months, Roswell became a fixture in Los Alamos every Sunday. He would attend church with Grace and the children, take them on outings, help with repairs around the schoolhouse. Slowly, carefully, he courted Grace Winston while also building relationships with her children. Thomas, initially wary of this man showing interest in his mother, gradually warmed to him after Roswell taught him how to rope and ride properly. Mary followed him around asking endless questions about the ranch and the cattle, clearly fascinated by the whole operation. Samuel decided Roswell was the strongest man alive and challenged him to feats of strength at every opportunity. And little Joseph simply adored him, climbing into his lap whenever possible and demanding stories. Grace bloomed under the attention. The grief never fully left her eyes, but it receded, making room for laughter and joy. She and Roswell talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering shared interests and values. She was well-read and intelligent, challenging his opinions and making him think. He was steady and kind, giving her a sense of security she had not felt since James died. By the time school started in September, the whole town knew that Roswell Harper was courting the new schoolteacher. Some of the older ladies clucked their tongues about propriety and mourning periods, but most folks were happy for them. Grace had proven herself a fine teacher and a good addition to the community, and Roswell was respected as a hard-working, honest man. One evening in late October, after the children were asleep, Roswell and Grace sat on the steps of the schoolhouse watching the stars come out. The air had turned crisp with the promise of winter. "I have been thinking," Roswell said carefully. "About what? About the future, about us." Grace turned to look at him, her face soft in the moonlight. "What about us?" "I love you, Grace. I know it is fast, and maybe I should wait longer, but I am not a man who plays games or hides what he feels. I love you, and I love your children. I want to marry you. I want to make us a real family." Her eyes filled with tears. "Roswell, I know there are complications. You have your teaching position here, and I have my ranch. I have been thinking about that too. What if I sold half my herd and hired someone to manage the ranch during the week? I could live here in town with you and the children during the school term, go back to the ranch on weekends and during the summer. Or if you would rather, you could give up teaching and we could all move to the ranch. Whatever works best for you and the children. You would do that. Give up your solitude, change your whole life. Grace, you and those children are my life now. Everything else is just details." She kissed him then, her lips soft and salt-sweet with tears. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. And we will figure out the details together, because that is what families do." They were married in the Los Alamos church on a Sunday in November with the whole town in attendance. Thomas stood up with Roswell, proud to be asked to be his best man. Mary and Samuel scattered flower petals, and little Joseph carried the rings on a pillow, concentrating fiercely on not dropping them. Grace wore a new dress of deep blue, paid for with her teaching salary, and Roswell wore his best suit. When they exchanged vows, Grace's voice only trembled slightly, and Roswell's hand was steady as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The reception was held at the hotel, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Roswell danced with Grace, then with each of the children, making them laugh as he spun them around. "I never thought I would be this happy again," Grace whispered to him as they swayed to a waltz. "Get used to it," he said. "I plan to make you this happy every day for the rest of our lives." They decided that Grace would continue teaching, at least for a few more years, until the younger children were older. Roswell sold part of his herd as planned and hired a young man named Daniel to manage the ranch during the week. He set up a small office in Los Alamos where he could conduct business, and he and Grace created a routine that worked for their blended family. During the week, Roswell was in town, helping with the children, assisting Grace with school preparations, becoming a true father to Thomas, Mary, Samuel, and Joseph. On weekends and during summer, they all went to the ranch, where the children learned to ride and work cattle and love the land as much as Roswell did. Thomas, at 13, took to ranching like a natural. By the time he was 16, he was Roswell's right-hand man, talking seriously about taking over the ranch someday. Mary, quieter and more studious, spent her free time reading every book she could get her hands on and dreaming of becoming a teacher like her mother. Samuel was the adventurer, always exploring, always finding new ways to get into minor trouble. And Joseph, the baby, charmed everyone he met with his sunny disposition and endless questions. 2 years into their marriage, Grace discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little trepidation. She was 34, not elderly by any means, but not a young woman either. But the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in the spring of 1884, she delivered a healthy baby boy. They named him Robert James Harper, honoring both Roswell's father and Grace's first husband. Far from feeling threatened or jealous, Roswell appreciated that Grace wanted to honor James's memory. He had never tried to replace the children's father, only to be an additional source of love and stability in their lives. Little Robert was an easy baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss. The older children doted on him, especially Joseph, who was thrilled to finally not be the youngest. Grace managed motherhood and teaching with remarkable grace, though Roswell did his best to shoulder as much of the burden as he could. "You know," Grace said one evening as they sat together watching Robert sleep in his cradle, "I never imagined my life would turn out like this." "Better or worse than you imagined?" Roswell asked. "Different," she said. "When James died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just be going through the motions, surviving for the children's sake. But then you set those 5 extra plates on your table and everything changed. Best decision I ever made. Mine too. Accepting your invitation, I mean. I was so close to refusing, to just asking for water and pressing on. Pride and fear almost made me pass by the greatest blessing of my life." Roswell pulled her close. "But you did not pass by. You stopped and you stayed and you let me love you. And I love you so very much." The years flowed past like the river outside Los Alamos, steady and sure. Thomas grew into a fine young man and married a local girl named Sarah. They built a house on Roswell's land and began raising their own family. Mary became a teacher, just as she had dreamed, taking over the Los Alamos school when Grace finally retired. Samuel headed west to California, seeking gold and adventure, but he wrote regularly and visited when he could. Joseph showed an aptitude for business and opened a feed store in town that quickly became successful. And in 1889, when Grace was 40 and thought she was long past childbearing, she surprised them both by getting pregnant again. This time she delivered a daughter, a tiny red-faced thing with a powerful set of lungs. They named her Catherine Louise, and she was spoiled rotten by her 4 older brothers and sister Sarah. Robert, now 5, appointed himself her personal protector and shadow. Grace left teaching for good this time, wanting to focus on raising Catherine while she still had the energy. Roswell and Grace grew older together, watching their family expand and flourish. They marked the passage of time in grandchildren, in harvests, in Christmases spent with the whole family crowded into the ranch house. The town of Los Alamos grew up around them, becoming more settled and civilized, though it never quite lost its rough frontier edges. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Roswell took Grace back to the spot by the river where he had first told her he loved her. It was summer, and the cottonwoods rustled in the warm breeze. "You remember that first night?" he asked, holding her hand. "When you drove up to my ranch with 4 starving children and more pride than sense?" Grace laughed. "I remember thinking you were either a saint or a fool for taking us in. Neither. Just a lonely man who saw a chance at happiness and grabbed it with both hands." "I was so scared," she admitted. "Not just of you, but of everything. The future, the unknown, whether I could actually provide for my children. And then there you were, setting extra plates without even being asked, treating us like we mattered. You did matter. You do matter. You are my whole world, Grace Harper. And you are mine, Roswell Harper." They kissed, still finding magic in the simple act even after 2 decades together. The sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and Grace thought about the strange path that had led her here. From Kansas to New Mexico, from grief to joy, from desperation to abundant blessing, 5 extra plates. Such a small gesture, really. But it had changed everything. The rest of their years together were marked by the quiet joys and sorrows that make up any long marriage. They buried friends, celebrated births, weathered droughts and good years alike. Roswell's hair turned silver, and Grace developed arthritis in her hands, but their love never wavered. Thomas took over the ranch fully when Roswell turned 60, though Roswell still liked to ride out and check on things, offering advice when asked and keeping his mouth shut when not. Mary married a banker from Santa Fe and had 3 children who visited every summer. Samuel struck it rich in California and sent money home to help build a new church in Los Alamos. Joseph expanded his business interests and became mayor, just like old Mayor Patterson before him. Robert followed his father into ranching, partnering with Thomas to expand their operation. And Catherine, the baby, became a doctor, shocking everyone by going to medical school back east and then returning to Los Alamos to practice. Grace lived to see all her children settled and happy, which she counted as her greatest achievement. She died peacefully in her sleep at age 70, with Roswell holding her hand and surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Roswell was lost without her. For 68 years he had walked the earth alone, and for 32 years he had walked it with Grace. Those 32 years had been the best of his life, worth more than all the rest combined. He lived another 3 years, long enough to see Robert's youngest daughter married and to hold his first great-great-grandchild. But his heart had gone out of him when Grace died, and everyone knew he was just marking time until he could join her. When he passed at the age of 71, the whole town turned out for his funeral. They buried him next to Grace in the Los Alamos Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains. The headstone was simple, just their names and dates, but below that, Thomas had insisted on adding an inscription. She arrived with 4 hungry children. He set 5 extra plates. Love did the rest. The story of Roswell Harper and Grace Winston became part of Los Alamos folklore, told and retold over the years. How a widow desperate and alone had found sanctuary with a lonely rancher. How a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love story that spanned decades and generations. How 5 extra plates had created a family that grew to include dozens of descendants. Their great-great-grandchildren still worked the ranch that Roswell had carved out of the wilderness. The schoolhouse where Grace had taught stood empty now, replaced by a modern building, but the town preserved it as a historical site. And every year on Thanksgiving, the Harper family gathered, as many as could make it, to share a meal and remember the couple who started it all. They always set extra plates, just in case a stranger should wander in hungry and in need of kindness. Because you never knew when setting an extra plate might change your life forever, might bring you the love and family you did not even know you were missing. That was the legacy of Roswell Harper and Grace Winston, the cowboy and the widow, who found each other in the vast wilderness of New Mexico Territory in 1883 and created something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone. Their love story was not filled with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, though it had its share of both. It was filled instead with small daily choices to love, to serve, to put family first, to build something lasting. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The August sun set over the New Mexico landscape, just as it had that first evening when Grace's wagon pulled up to Roswell's ranch. But now, more than 60 years later, the land was dotted with houses belonging to their descendants. The ranch had grown and prospered. Los Alamos had become a real town with paved streets and electricity and all the modern conveniences. But the story remained the same. A widow arrived with 4 hungry children. A cowboy set 5 extra plates. And love, patient and kind and strong enough to weather any storm, did the rest. The Harper family continued to thrive, generation after generation, each one adding their own chapters to the story. But they never forgot where it started, in kindness, in compassion, in a lonely man's decision to share his table and his home with strangers in need. Sometimes on quiet evenings, You could walk past the old ranch house and almost hear the echoes of children's laughter, smell bacon frying, hear Grace's gentle voice and Roswell's steady one. The love they built did not die with them. It lived on in every descendant, in every act of kindness, in every extra plate set for a stranger. That was the true miracle of their story. Not that they found love in an unlikely place at an unlikely time, but that the love they found was strong enough to echo through the years, touching lives they would never meet, creating ripples that spread far beyond what they could have imagined that first night when a desperate widow and a lonely cowboy made the choice to trust each other. And so the story ended where it began, with hunger satisfied, strangers becoming family, and the simple truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the smallest acts of generosity. 5 extra plates, 1 night of hospitality, a lifetime of love. The end, and yet not the end at all, because love like that never really ends. It just keeps growing, spreading, touching new lives, creating new stories. The widow and the cowboy were gone, but what they built together remained, solid as the New Mexico earth, enduring as the mountains, precious as water in the desert. They had lived well, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask?